I do not want to go home with you. The words came from 8-year-old Emily Carter, and they stopped her billionaire father cold in the middle of a crowded diner. Nathan Carter had spent 42 years learning how to solve problems. He could close $1 million deal before lunch, buy a company before dinner, and make almost any inconvenience disappear with a phone call. But he could not make his little girl look at him. Emily stood beside their booth with her small backpack over one shoulder, her fingers wrapped tightly around an old photograph of her mother. Emily, please sit down. I said I do not want to go home. We can talk about this in the car. She shook her head. Nathan lowered his voice. Then tell me what you need. Emily finally looked at him, and her answer was so quiet that he almost missed it. I need you to stop trying to fix me. The diner seemed to shrink around them. Silverware clinked somewhere near the kitchen. Rain tapped softly against the windows. A waitress named Sophie Bennett stood behind the counter, holding a coffee pot, and watched without staring. She had served Nathan and Emily several times over the past few months. She knew Nathan was wealthy. Everyone in town did. But Sophie had never treated him differently because of it. To her, he was simply a tired father sitting across from a little girl who looked like she was carrying something far too heavy for 8 years old. Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. I can take you anywhere tonight. We can get dinner somewhere you like. We can go shopping. Whatever you want. Emily looked down at the photograph. That is what you always say. Nathan stopped. What is wrong with that? Emily swallowed. Nothing. She placed the photograph on the table. That is the problem. Sophie slowly set the coffee pot down. Nathan noticed. Can you give us a minute? Sophie nodded, but before she walked away, she looked at Emily. Then she looked at Nathan. Her voice was gentle. She does not need another thing from you. Nathan stared at her. A waitress had just spoken to him in a way his executives rarely dared to. Excuse me. Sophie did not raise her voice. She needs you. 3 words. Nothing more. Nathan almost laughed, but the sound never came. He looked at his daughter again. Emily was not asking for a new toy, a vacation, or another expensive surprise. She was staring at the photograph of the woman they had both lost, waiting for her father to understand something he had spent months refusing to face. Nathan sat down slowly. For the first time that evening, he did not reach for his phone. He did not call his assistant. He did not offer money. He simply looked at Emily and asked, "What are you trying to tell me?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. Sophie turned away and gave them space. Outside, the rain continued falling over the dark street. Inside, a billionaire who could buy almost anything finally discovered the one thing money could never purchase: another chance to listen to his little girl. Nathan kept his phone on the table, screen dark, his hand resting beside it, as if he had forgotten what it was for. Emily remained across from him, small shoulders tense beneath her pale blue sweater, the old photograph of her mother still between them. "You want me to listen?" Nathan said. "Then tell me what I am supposed to hear." Emily looked at him for several seconds. "You never listen." "I am listening now." "Because she told you to." Nathan glanced toward the counter. Sophie was wiping down a nearby table, giving them enough distance to make the conversation private. "She does not know anything about us," Nathan said. Emily's eyes lowered. "She knows more than you think." That sentence stayed with him. Nathan was accustomed to people telling him what he wanted to hear. Employees praised his decisions. Investors trusted his instincts. Reporters called him brilliant. But his daughter had just reduced his entire world to one simple accusation. "You do not listen." Nathan leaned back. "Okay, then help me understand." Emily touched the corner of the photograph. "Mom used to sit here." Nathan looked at the empty space beside her. "I know." "No, you do not." Her voice became smaller. "You keep changing everything." Nathan frowned. "What do you mean?" "The house. My school. My room. Even the restaurant. I was trying to make things easier for you. You were trying to make everything different." Nathan opened his mouth, then stopped. Sophie approached with a fresh glass of water for Emily. She placed it gently on the table. "Here you go, sweetheart." Emily whispered, "Thank you." Nathan watched the exchange. There was something about the way Emily looked at Sophie that made him uncomfortable. It was not fear. It was trust. "What does she know that I do not?" Nathan asked. Sophie looked at him calmly. "Probably nothing you cannot know yourself." "Then why does she talk to you?" Sophie glanced at Emily. "Because I do not tell her what she should feel." Nathan absorbed that quietly. Then he reached for his wallet. "Fine. I want to help. Tell me what you think she needs." Sophie immediately shook her head. No, Nathan paused. No, not for money. I did not say money. Sophie looked at the expensive watch on his wrist, then back at him. You did not have to. Emily almost smiled, but it disappeared quickly. Nathan put his wallet away. You think I use money to solve everything? Do you? Sophie asked. Nathan stared at her. I provide for my daughter. I believe you. I have given her everything. Sophie nodded once. Maybe that is what she is trying to tell you. Nathan looked at Emily. What? Emily finally raised her eyes. I do not want everything. The words were quiet. I just want one thing. Nathan waited. What? Emily looked at the photograph again. I want you to remember Mom with me. Nathan's expression changed. For months, he had removed photographs from the house because he thought they made Emily sad. He had packed away her mother's favorite dishes. He had avoided the old songs. He had even stopped taking Emily to places where memories might surface. He had called it protection. Suddenly, it sounded like erasure. Emily, he whispered. I thought I was helping. I know. She looked at him with tears in her eyes. That is why I did not know how to tell you. Nathan's chest tightened. Sophie quietly stepped away. She did not need to say anything now. Emily had finally said more in 30 seconds than she had said in weeks. Nathan looked at the photograph and then at his daughter. Tell me about her, he said. Emily blinked. What? Your mom. Tell me what you remember. Emily hesitated. Then, for the first time that evening, she moved the photograph closer to him. She made pancakes on Saturday mornings. Nathan smiled faintly. She always burned the first one. Emily gave a tiny laugh. She said it was supposed to be that way. Nathan laughed too, softly, almost surprised by the sound. And behind the counter, Sophie looked away, allowing a father and his little girl to share a memory that money had never been able to replace. The empty chair beside Emily had been there for almost a year, and Nathan had finally realized he was the only person pretending it was not there. Why do you always leave that seat empty? He asked. Emily looked at him across the diner booth. Because that was Mom's seat. You can sit there. I do not want to. Emily, it is just a chair. Her eyes lifted sharply. It was never just a chair. Nathan went silent. Rain whispered against the diner windows, and the warm yellow lights reflected across the polished table. A few booths away, Sophie moved quietly between customers, but she kept her distance. Nathan looked at the empty seat again. For months, he had tried to erase every reminder that might make Emily sad. He had changed the furniture at home. He had moved her mother's photographs into storage. He had even replaced the old kitchen table where Emily and her mother used to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. Nathan had thought he was creating a fresh start. Now he wondered if he had simply removed every place where Emily could still feel close to her mother. I thought you hated coming here, he said. Emily shook her head. I hated coming here with you. The words landed softly, but they carried more weight than anger ever could. Nathan leaned forward. Why? Emily looked toward the empty chair. Because you always make us leave before I can remember anything. Nathan stared at her. I thought remembering hurt you. It does. Emily's fingers moved over the edge of the photograph. But forgetting hurts more. Nathan lowered his eyes. He had no answer. Sophie approached with 2 plates and placed them on the table. Blueberry pancakes, she said. Emily looked up. I did not order pancakes. Sophie smiled. I know. Nathan glanced at her. Why did you bring them? Sophie pointed toward the photograph. Your daughter mentioned Saturday mornings. Emily looked at her father. Mom made pancakes every Saturday. And she burned the first one, Nathan said. Emily smiled faintly. Every single time. Sophie placed the plate between them. Then I figured one of you should keep the tradition alive. Nathan almost objected. Instead, he picked up a fork. Emily watched him. You are going to eat them? I am going to try. You cannot cook. That is not true. Emily raised an eyebrow. Dad, you once burned soup. Sophie turned away quickly, hiding a smile. Nathan shook his head. That happened one time. It happened twice. For a few seconds, the tension disappeared. Emily laughed. Nathan laughed with her. Then the laughter faded, leaving something gentler behind. Emily touched the photograph again. Dad, yes. Why did you put all Mom's pictures away? Nathan looked at the window. He could have given the easy answer. He could have said he was protecting her. But tonight, he was beginning to understand that honesty mattered more than comfort. Because I did not know how to look at them without missing her. Emily stared at him. You miss her? Nathan's voice became quiet. Every day. Emily looked surprised. Then why do you never say that? Nathan swallowed. Because I thought I had to be strong for you. Emily looked down at her hands. I did not need you to be strong all the time. Nathan slowly looked at her. What did you need? Emily's eyes moved to the empty chair. I needed you to miss her with me. Sophie stopped behind the counter. Nathan did not notice. The diner seemed to become completely still. For the first time, he understood what Emily had been trying to say since the beginning. She had never wanted him to make the pain disappear. She had wanted proof that she was not carrying it alone. The next morning, Emily placed a folded sheet of paper beneath her napkin before breakfast. What is that? Nathan asked. Nothing. Emily. Dad. He smiled despite himself. You know that answer never works. Emily pulled the paper closer. Then stop asking. For once, Nathan did not push. He simply poured himself coffee and waited. The lesson from the night before was still fresh in his mind. Listening meant allowing silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Across town, the diner had already opened, and Sophie was beginning her morning shift. She had no idea that one quiet conversation would soon change the way Nathan saw his daughter, his grief, and even himself. Emily had written 17 letters to her father. She had never given him a single one. Some were only a few lines long. Others filled both sides of a page. Nathan discovered this when Emily finally pushed the folded paper across the table. What is it? He asked. A letter. For me. She nodded. Nathan did not reach for it immediately. Do you want me to read it? Emily hesitated. I do not know. Nathan nodded. Then I will wait. Emily looked surprised. You will? Yes. He placed his hands flat on the table. It is yours. You decide. Emily studied him as though she was waiting for the old Nathan to return, the one who would have taken control and decided what was best. But he did not. The kitchen clock ticked softly behind them. A car passed outside. Somewhere in the house, the refrigerator hummed. Finally, Emily whispered, I wrote it after Mom died. Nathan felt his chest tighten, but he kept his voice calm. Why did you not give it to me? Emily looked down. Because I thought you were already too busy. Busy? You were always working. Then you were always traveling. Then you were always trying to change things. Nathan closed his eyes for a moment. He knew she was right. After Mara died, he had filled every hour with meetings, flights, projects, and plans. He had told himself that providing stability was love. He had hired tutors, arranged private lessons, renovated Emily's room, and planned vacations. He had filled the house with everything except himself. What did you write? He asked. Emily shook her head. I do not want you to read it. Nathan nodded. Okay. You are not going to ask. Again. No. Emily watched him carefully. Why? Nathan looked at her. Because you told me no. Something softened in her expression. Then she pushed the paper toward him again. You can read it. Nathan picked it up slowly. The handwriting was uneven in places, the letters large and careful. He read only a few lines before his eyes became wet. Emily had written about her mother, about Saturday pancakes, about the sound of Mara singing while she cooked, about how the house felt different after she was gone. Then Nathan reached the final sentence. He stopped breathing for a moment. Emily had written, I do not need you to make Mom disappear, so I can be happy. I need you to remember her with me. Nathan lowered the page. Emily. She looked away. I thought you did not want to talk about her. I wanted to, Nathan said. I just did not know how. Emily looked back at him. Then why did you put away her pictures? Nathan had no perfect answer left. Because every time I saw them, I missed her so much that I did not know what to do with that feeling. Emily's voice became smaller. I miss her too. Nathan reached across the table, then stopped before touching her hand. He waited. Emily slowly moved her hand toward his. Their fingers met. No grand speech followed. No miracle arrived through a phone call or a bank account. There was only a father and his daughter sitting at a kitchen table, finally telling the truth. Later that afternoon, Nathan returned to the diner with Emily. Sophie noticed the difference immediately. Emily walked beside her father instead of behind him. Nathan held the door open, then waited while Emily chose the booth. Sophie brought them water. You two look different today, she said. Emily smiled. Nathan looked at Sophie. She gave me something to read. Sophie glanced at Emily. Did she? Emily nodded. Nathan took a slow breath. I think I finally understand. Sophie raised an eyebrow. Understand what? Nathan looked at his daughter. That she was never asking me to fix her grief. Emily squeezed his hand. I was asking you to stay. Sophie said nothing. She simply smiled and walked away. And for the first time since Mara had died, Nathan understood that staying was not a promise made with money, schedules, or grand gestures. It was a choice made one quiet moment at a time. I canceled the meeting. Nathan said it so casually that Emily almost dropped her fork. What meeting? The one in Chicago. You were supposed to be there today? Yes. Emily stared at him. And you canceled it? Nathan nodded. I wanted to have breakfast with you. Emily looked suspicious. Why? Nathan smiled faintly. Because you are my daughter. That never stopped you before. The words were quiet, but Nathan felt them. He did not defend himself. He simply nodded. You are right. Emily looked down at her pancakes. It was the first time Nathan had admitted that without explaining it away. No excuses. No business emergency. No promise that he would make it up later. Just the truth sitting between them beside a plate of blueberry pancakes. They were back at the diner, seated in the same booth near the window where everything had begun to change. Sophie moved between tables with a coffee pot in one hand and a stack of menus in the other. Every few minutes, she glanced toward them. She could see something Nathan could not have imagined a month earlier. Emily was talking. Not constantly. Not perfectly. But enough. What are we doing after breakfast? Emily asked. Nathan reached for his coffee. Whatever you want. She frowned. That sounds like one of your answers. All right. I will choose. That sounds worse. Sophie laughed quietly as she passed their booth. Nathan looked up. Do not encourage her. I would never, Sophie said, smiling. Emily grinned. Then her expression became thoughtful. Can we go home? Nathan paused. Of course. Not to work. No, not to another meeting. No, just home. Nathan nodded. Just home. Emily looked relieved. It was such a small request, but Nathan understood what it meant. She was not asking for a mansion, a vacation, or a new experience. She wanted ordinary time with her father. Nathan had spent years believing that being a good father meant giving Emily opportunities other children could only dream about. Private schools, international trips, music lessons, a house with more rooms than they needed. But sitting across from her now, he realized none of those things mattered if she had to compete with his calendar for a place in his life. Sophie brought the check. Nathan reached for it. Emily immediately said, I can pay for my pancakes. Nathan smiled. You have $3 in your backpack. That is enough. For pancakes. For my pancakes. Sophie placed the check on the table and said, I think she has a point. Nathan looked at Sophie. You are enjoying this. A little. Emily laughed. Nathan shook his head and pulled out his wallet. Then he stopped. He looked at Emily. How about this? You pay $3. I pay the rest. Emily considered it. Fine. She placed 3 crumpled $1 bills on the table with exaggerated seriousness. Sophie collected them and nodded. Very generous. Emily smiled proudly. Nathan watched them and felt something unexpected. Peace. Not the polished kind he had tried to manufacture through expensive vacations and perfect plans. Something smaller. Something real. When they stepped outside, Emily reached for his hand without asking. Nathan looked down. Where do you want to go? Home. Okay. They walked toward the waiting car. Nathan's driver opened the door, but Nathan stopped. Actually, I will drive. Emily looked surprised. You? Yes. You hate driving. Nathan smiled. I am learning. They climbed into the car together. Before starting the engine, Nathan turned off his phone and placed it in the center console. Emily noticed. You are really doing that. For one afternoon. Only one. Nathan looked at her. No. Let us start with one afternoon. Emily smiled. It was not a perfect promise. It was better than that. It was a promise Nathan could keep. And as the car pulled away from the diner, Sophie watched from the window. She did not know it yet, but the little girl who had once refused to go home with her father was finally beginning to believe that home might be somewhere her father was willing to stay. 3 weeks passed, and Nathan kept the promise Emily had never expected him to keep. He came home earlier. He ate dinner at the kitchen table. He listened when Emily talked about school, even when the story involved 20 minutes about a science project he barely understood. Most importantly, he stopped trying to make every difficult feeling disappear. But one evening, Emily asked a question that brought everything back to the woman who had started this change. Dad, why does Sophie understand me? Nathan looked up from his dinner. What do you mean? She knows when I am sad. Maybe she is good at her job. Emily shook her head. It is more than that. Nathan knew she was right. Sophie had never tried to become part of their family. She had never asked about Nathan's business or accepted anything beyond the ordinary tips customers left behind. Yet somehow, she seemed to notice the things he missed. The next afternoon, Nathan and Emily stopped at the diner. Sophie was carrying a tray toward a booth when Emily called her name. Sophie. She turned and smiled. Well, look who came back. Emily slid into the familiar booth. Nathan sat beside her instead of across from her. Sophie noticed. That is new. Nathan smiled. We are trying something different. Sophie set down 2 menus. I can see that. Emily looked at her carefully. Can I ask you something? Of course. How do you know when someone misses somebody? Sophie became still for a moment. She glanced toward Nathan, then back at Emily. Sometimes people tell you. Emily shook her head. My dad does not. Nathan looked at the table. Sophie took a slow breath. Sometimes you can tell by what people avoid. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Sophie pulled out the chair across from them and sat for just a moment. My dad used to work 2 jobs when I was growing up. He always said he was doing it for our family. He paid the bills. He fixed things around the house. He made sure we had what we needed. Emily listened closely. Was he a good dad? Sophie smiled softly. He loved us very much. That is not what I asked. Nathan almost smiled at the directness of his daughter. Sophie nodded. You are right. He was loving, but he was not always present. Nathan looked at her. What happened? Sophie glanced toward the window. Nothing dramatic. That is the strange part. There was no single day when everything changed. There were just hundreds of little moments. Dinners he missed. School events he could not attend. Conversations he postponed because he was tired. Emily's expression changed. Nathan felt the words settle heavily inside him. Sophie continued. When I was older, I realized my dad thought providing for us was the same thing as being with us. Nathan slowly lowered his eyes. That sounds familiar. Sophie looked directly at him. I thought it might. Emily touched Nathan's hand beneath the table. He turned toward her. I do not want you to become like that, she said. Nathan's expression softened. I do not either. Sophie stood. Then you already know what to do. Nathan looked up. What? Keep showing up. She picked up the menus. Not perfectly, just consistently. Emily smiled. That sounds easy. Sophie laughed softly. It is simple. That does not mean it is easy. Then she walked away. Nathan watched her return to work. He had spent years building systems that depended on precision, schedules, and control. But the most important lesson of his life had come from a waitress who had never asked him for anything. Emily leaned against his arm. Dad, yes. Can we stay here a little longer? Nathan looked toward Sophie, then at his daughter. As long as you want. Outside, the afternoon light settled across the windows, turning the diner warm and gold. Nathan realized that showing up did not always require grand gestures. Sometimes it meant staying 10 minutes longer. Sometimes it meant listening to a story twice. Sometimes it meant sitting beside the person you loved and allowing silence to be enough. And for Nathan, that quiet lesson was becoming something he could finally carry home. The first real test came on a Thursday afternoon when Nathan's phone began vibrating before he had even finished his coffee. What is it? Emily asked. Nathan glanced at the screen. A business problem. Are you leaving? I might have to. Emily's face changed, and Nathan immediately knew this was different from the old days. A month earlier, he would have stood up, answered the call, and disappeared behind a dozen urgent decisions before Emily could finish a sentence. But now he looked at the phone, then at his daughter. Give me 1 minute, he said. Emily nodded, though her expression remained uncertain. Nathan stepped outside the diner and answered. His chief executive officer explained that a major investor meeting had suddenly been moved to that evening in New York. Nathan listened quietly. The decision was important. Millions of dollars were involved, and several executives were waiting for his direction. Yet through the diner window, he could see Emily sitting alone in their booth, tracing a finger around the edge of her water glass. Nathan looked at the clock. Then he looked at his phone. Move the meeting to tomorrow morning, he said. There was a pause on the other end. Tomorrow? Yes. Nathan, the investors are already expecting you tonight. Then tell them I will be there tomorrow. But you said this could not wait. Nathan looked through the window again. Emily had picked up the photograph of her mother. I changed my mind. He ended the call and walked back inside. Emily looked up immediately. Are you going? Nathan sat beside her. No, she studied his face. You really are staying? Yes. Emily was quiet for a moment. Was it important? Nathan smiled. Very. Then why did you stay? Nathan thought about giving her the easy answer. Instead, he told her the truth. Because you are important too. Emily looked down, but Nathan saw the small smile she tried to hide. Sophie approached with 2 cups of hot chocolate. I thought you two might need these. Nathan looked at the cups. We did not order them. Sophie shrugged. That has never stopped me from making a good guess. Emily wrapped both hands around hers. Sophie, yes. Do you think people can change? Sophie glanced at Nathan. Absolutely. Nathan raised an eyebrow. That sounded suspiciously specific. Sophie smiled. Maybe I have seen it happen. Emily looked between them. My dad is changing. Nathan nearly choked on his coffee. Sophie laughed. That is a strong review. He still works too much, Emily added. And he still thinks he can cook. Nathan sighed. I thought we agreed not to discuss my cooking. In public. Emily laughed. Sophie leaned against the booth. Then maybe he is not finished changing. The laughter faded gently. Nathan looked at Emily. I know I have a long way to go. Emily nodded. You do. Thank you for being honest. She looked surprised. You are not mad? No. Nathan reached for his hot chocolate. I need you to tell me when I am getting it wrong. Emily considered that. Even if it hurts. Nathan nodded. Especially then. Sophie watched them quietly. There was something different in Nathan now. Not perfection. Not certainty. Just humility. And perhaps that was what Emily had needed all along. A father willing to admit that he did not have every answer. Later, when the diner began to empty, Emily asked Sophie a question that made Nathan look up. Why did you help us? Sophie stopped. What do you mean? You could have just served our food. Sophie smiled softly. Sometimes people walk into your life needing something they do not know how to ask for. Nathan looked at her. And you knew what we needed? Sophie shook her head. No. I only knew that your daughter needed someone to listen. Emily leaned against Nathan's shoulder. She did. Nathan looked at Sophie for a long moment. Thank you. Sophie nodded. You are welcome. Outside, evening settled over the street, and the diner windows glowed against the dark. Nathan reached for Emily's hand. This time, she took his without hesitation. He had once believed that being a powerful man meant having the answer before anyone else. Now he was learning something quieter. Sometimes strength was simply choosing what mattered most, then staying long enough to prove it. On Saturday morning, Emily woke Nathan before sunrise with a question he never expected to hear. Dad, can Sophie come to Mom's house? Nathan sat up slowly. Sophie, yes. Why? Emily held the old photograph against her chest. Because I want her to see where Mom used to live. Nathan was quiet. The house had been closed off for months, not physically, but emotionally. Mara's things were still there, carefully packed into boxes Nathan had never opened. Emily had avoided the place since the funeral. Nathan had avoided it, too. Are you sure? He asked. Emily nodded. I think I am. Nathan looked at the clock. Then we can go. By 9 in the morning, they were standing outside the old house on Maple Street. The lawn needed attention, and fallen leaves covered the front steps. Emily held Nathan's hand as they walked toward the door. Sophie stood beside them, wearing a simple gray sweater and carrying a small paper bag. What is that? Emily asked. Sophie smiled. Something for later. Nathan unlocked the door. The moment it opened, he felt the familiar weight of memory. The house smelled faintly of cedar and old books. Sunlight slipped through the curtains, touching furniture that had remained exactly where Mara left it. Emily stepped inside. She did not speak. Nathan waited. Sophie waited too. Then Emily walked toward the kitchen. Mom used to stand here. Nathan followed. She made pancakes right there. Emily pointed toward the stove. Sophie placed her hand over her heart. I can almost imagine it. Emily smiled. She always sang when she cooked. Nathan looked at the floor. I remember. Emily turned toward him. What song? Nathan hesitated. He had not heard it in almost a year. Then he quietly began humming the melody. Emily's eyes widened. You remember? Nathan smiled sadly. Of course I remember. Sophie remained silent as Emily moved closer to her father. Why did you forget everything at home? Nathan took a breath. I did not forget. I was scared. Of what? That if I let myself remember her, I would never be able to be happy again. Emily stared at him. Were you trying to make me forget too? Nathan shook his head. No. I thought I was protecting you. Emily looked around the kitchen. You were protecting yourself too. Nathan could have corrected her. Instead, he nodded. Yes. The honesty seemed to change the air in the room. Sophie opened the paper bag she had brought. Inside were 3 small containers of blueberry pancake mix. Emily laughed. You brought pancakes? Your father told me about the Saturday tradition. Nathan looked at Sophie. I told you that. You talk more than you think. Emily smiled. Can we make them? Nathan looked at the kitchen. I do. Not no. Emily raised an eyebrow. You said you were learning. Sophie laughed. That was brave of him. Soon, the kitchen filled with the soft sound of conversation. Nathan measured ingredients. Emily read the instructions. Sophie stood nearby, offering advice only when asked. The first pancake came out uneven. Emily stared at it. That looks terrible. Nathan sighed. Thank you for your support. Sophie covered a smile. It is a little rustic. Emily laughed so hard that Nathan began laughing too. For several minutes, the house did not feel empty. It felt lived in again. When they finally sat at the old kitchen table, Emily placed the photograph of Mara between them. Mom would like this, she said. Nathan looked at the picture. I think she would. Emily reached for Sophie's hand. Thank you for coming. Sophie squeezed it gently. I am glad you asked. Nathan watched them, feeling something shift inside him. Sophie had entered their lives as a stranger behind a diner counter. She had never promised to heal their family. She had simply listened when they needed someone to listen. And now, sitting in Mara's kitchen with Emily smiling beside him, Nathan understood the quiet miracle Sophie had helped create. The past had not disappeared. The grief had not vanished. But the memories no longer felt like a locked room. They had become a doorway. And for the first time, Nathan was willing to walk through it with his daughter. Dad, I think Mom would want us to stop being afraid. Emily said it quietly at the old kitchen table, but Nathan felt the words reach somewhere inside him that no business deal ever had. The house was still warm from the morning pancakes, and sunlight rested across the table where Mara had once sat every Saturday. Sophie stood near the kitchen window, giving them space. Nathan looked at his daughter. What makes you say that? Emily touched the photograph between them. Because you smiled today. Nathan looked down. He had not noticed. I guess I did. You never smile when you look at her picture. Nathan took a slow breath. Maybe I am learning how. Emily leaned closer. Then we should keep it here. Keep what? The picture. Nathan looked toward the living room. You want to leave it here? Emily nodded. I do not want Mom to become something we hide in a box. Nathan stared at the photograph for a long moment. Then he picked it up and placed it on the shelf above the kitchen table. Nothing dramatic happened. No music filled the room. No miracle appeared. But Emily's face softened as she looked at it. That feels better, she whispered. Nathan nodded. It does. Sophie smiled from the window. Nathan turned toward her. You know, I still do not understand why you cared so much. Sophie looked surprised. About what? About us. Sophie lowered her eyes for a moment. Because I know what it feels like when someone you love becomes a memory. Nathan waited. Sophie continued. My mother passed away when I was young. My father tried to keep everything normal. He thought if he kept working and kept our house quiet, the sadness would eventually leave. Emily asked, did it? Sophie smiled sadly. No, we just got better at hiding it. Nathan understood immediately. That is why you recognized it in me. Sophie nodded. Maybe. And you recognized it in Emily. She was easier to read. Emily smiled. I am not easy to read. Sophie laughed. You are when you are sitting in front of a plate of pancakes. Nathan laughed too. Then Emily became serious. Sophie, will you come back next Saturday? Sophie looked at Nathan. Nathan did not answer for his daughter. He waited. Emily repeated, please? Sophie smiled. I would like that. Nathan looked around the kitchen. A few weeks earlier, he would have considered this an ordinary Saturday. Now he understood how extraordinary ordinary could be. A little girl had finally spoken after months of silence. A father had finally stopped trying to solve grief and started sharing it. And a waitress, who had never asked for recognition, had quietly reminded them that love was not measured by what a person could provide. It was measured by presence, by patience, by the courage to stay. When they returned to the diner that afternoon, Sophie slipped back into her familiar role behind the counter. Emily chose their usual booth. Nathan sat beside her. Sophie brought 3 cups of coffee and 1 hot chocolate. I did not order this, Emily said. I know, Sophie replied. You are starting to make a habit of that, Nathan said. Sophie smiled. Some habits are worth keeping. Emily looked at her father. Dad, yes. Are you still going to work tonight? Nathan glanced at his phone. There were 7 missed messages and 3 new emails. He turned the phone face down. No, Emily smiled. Really? Really? She leaned against his shoulder. Nathan looked through the window at the fading afternoon light. For years, he had believed that being a billionaire meant having enough power to change almost anything. But the truth was humbler. He could not bring Mara back. He could not erase Emily's grief. He could not rewrite the years he had missed. What he could do was stay. What he could do was listen. What he could do was choose his daughter again tomorrow and the day after that. Sophie watched them quietly from across the diner. Nathan met her eyes and gave a grateful nod. She returned it. No grand reward was needed. No announcement. No applause. Just a father sitting beside his little girl, finally present for the life they still had. And when Emily reached for his hand, Nathan held it gently. The diner grew quiet around them. In that simple silence, he understood the lesson he had spent a lifetime learning. Love does not always arrive with a miracle. Sometimes, love is the person who stays long enough for you to find your way home.